The guy who brought life to the world is Angus Young. Into each rock and roll heartbeat and succeeded in maintaining that fire. For more than 50 years, and if have you ever seen or heard Back in Black? A little duck is frantically crossing. Have you ever had your blood boil on stage because Thunder's very first guitar note struck, and you've already entered? Angus is more than just a musician in his world. He is the epitome of steadfast devotion to music. The everlasting source of one of the best rock bands of all time is acdc. Forever, while others modified their style, their sound by following the latest trends. Decided to remain loyal to himself. 1SG, a guitar, a schoolboy outfit, and a passion that never wavered, but behind those angry riffs is a distant, more complicated existence, a poor upbringing, years of floating in Glasgow with unknown bands, brothers passing, his career's longtime partner, and a quiet, solitary life characterized by isolation compared with what he causes. This is Angus Young's story on stage. The rock's tiniest guy, but possibly the early was the one who made it roar the longest. Angus MacKinnon Young's birthdate was Scottish city of Glasgow, March 31, 1955, a desolate industrial metropolis where kids grew raised in a closed-off coal smoke environment. Industries and streets covered with fog. His family resided at 6 Terrifying Road in the Cranhill, is a working-class neighborhood. Characterized by a high rate of unemployment and a schoolyard violence and the requirement that children, if they didn't want to, they could toughen up sooner. Angus was the youngest of William Young. His father had 8 siblings. Was a member of the Royal Air Force from World War II prior to assuming different work positions to provide for the family, from asbestos cutter to manufacturing worker. Postman Margaret, his mother, is a powerful, dedicated to raising children, the Jewish woman, their kids in a small home without any heating, no refrigerator, and frequently just one full daily meal. Life was difficult, but music was. Angus is always there at their house. Older brothers George and Stephen, Alexander, Malcolm, and Malcolm all performed music. Sought a career in performing in Europe. George rose to prominence as a producer and Easy Beats member, while Malcolm, who would go on to co-found acdc. His closest musical friend was Angus. Angus's first experience with an instrument was an antique banjo that wasn't a guitar. In order to assist his small later brother, you start playing music. Their mother managed to collect enough money to purchase a worn-out acoustic guitar for Angus. Due to the fact that they were wealthy, but because they were aware that the only way to in the home, kids may imagine an alternative existence, that Angus never had a formal courses in music. One meeting with his Alexander's brother was all the guidance he received from that point on. He learned by hand, by ear, by devotion, spending hours in his small rehearsing every chord in the bedroom, riff in a loud voice until his fingers bled. The guitar was his only possession in the chilly world. Sanctuary. When Angus was 8 years old in 1963, the Young family made the decision to move to Australia, made a survival-driven decision that Glasgow had its worst winter this year. TV commercials and history urging low-income households to relocate to the Southern Hemisphere in search of fresh life. Young seized the opportunity like a roll of the dice. They reached Sydney following a lengthy journey with only a handful of bags and brittle optimism. The family was kept in Villawood for a while. A steel Baroque-style migrant hostel settlement that would eventually turn into a detention camp for illegal immigrants. They occupied small metal shelters. Cold in the winter and scorching in the summer, sharing kitchens and restrooms with dozens of other families, but once more, music turned into their. The older George Young, Angus's redemption brother, became friends with Dutchman Harry Vanda. Additionally, migrants reside in Villawood, and together they formed the Easy Beats, the first significant rock band from Australia. To George's achievement throughout that time period sparked a strong spark in his younger siblings, particularly Angus, quiet and Malcolm, reticent boys who underwent a radical change. Clutching a guitar later, the family relocated to Burwood's Burleigh Street, Sydney suburb. Angus went to Burwood first grade, followed by Ashfield Boys High School, however, never worked for him. He felt alienated in art class. Angus left all subjects at the age of 15. They made their adult debut with a couple money received from printing tasks as well as an unformed musical dream. Then in that his first used bedroom Gibson SG was purchased from a local. Angus would eventually refer to it as a music store. His life companion, and ever since he never left music ever again. When Angus Young slipped in his early career, he left school at the age of 15 without a diploma. Lack of guidance and no one to lead him into. He did, however, own an ancient SG guitar. A couple years of playing the banjo on the fly, and above all, a fixation on sound, he worked night shifts at a slaughter at a printing press, house set type, and was even the focus of an odd rumor that he was formerly employed by an adult magazine, something that Angus subsequently denied. With a trace of annoyance, I didn't do anything but print letters. Individuals, but despite those draining days, he spent each evening focusing on the guitar, experimenting with different tones to create the tight, punchy chords that he plays struck steel like a hammer. In the early Angus started singing in the 1970s with tiny musicians such as the local rock group Kentucky with a shifting lineup. The band shortly Tantrum with Angus was the new name. Playing lead guitar with people like Mark Sneddon, Trevor James, and Bob McLean. Even though the group never became well known, Angus developed his stage persona there, gaining rhythmic leadership skills in a band, raw energy and eye contact. But the true pivotal moment occurred when Angus and his Malcolm, a brother, joined the Marcus Hook Roll Band. Was a brief yet important project involving Harry and George Young. Vanda. The album Tales of was recorded. Despite being a commercial failure, Old Granddaddy made the first actual entrance to the young people's professional music world. Then, one evening in 1973, Malcolm proposed that they start a new band called Angus. Without hesitation, I accepted the name. Their sister Margaret noticed acdc on a sewing machine's back was picked because it stood for authority, power and constant energy, and aptly given that none of them were aware of. They intended to produce one of the rock history's most explosive bands. Angus didn't have a famous image at the time. Tried out many theatrical clothes. Spider-Man occasionally, and occasionally a cowboy or even a superhero parody known as Extremely Angry. But Margaret then developed an odd notion: why not dress in school attire? Uniform, which he initially did merely to attract attention, but none could anticipated that the ensemble would become into his trademark for life. As a youngster who never grew up playing a guitar, much like him directing A Storm of Lightning, Can I Sit Next to You, the debut single by acdc. Dave was the vocalist for the recording of Girl Evans, but it didn't leave a lasting impression. Only when Bon Scott joined did the band's actions really spark his passion. A gruff voice and a spirit of rebellion provided acdc its genuine identity. At that point, armed with his vintage Gibson SG, Angus Chuck Berry-style schoolboy uniform, duckwalking and thrilling performances become an indispensable presence on the stage. In 1975, High, AC/DC's debut album, was released. Voltage in Australia. No one could have thought that an immigrant's record, children making nasty, ugly riffs and yelling careless songs, would be the initial shot in a worldwide rock revolution. From a banjo with 6 strings to elevated voltage coming from a tiny bedroom in Angus Burwood to crowded concert halls, Young was drenched when he took his first steps in perspiration and perseverance when traveling to become one of the most popular rock and roll. The success of living legends' career was a band is never created to appeal to the radio. They didn't compose love songs or ballads. They didn't have any layered harmonies. Guitars, drums, and a revving voice engine, as well as a tiny whirlwind called Angus from High Voltage. Young 1975 saw the release of their debut in Australia. To Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap and TNT. acdc continued to push the boundaries of difficult rock with a seemingly straightforward formula: a large number of chords but very few vitality. In a time when a lot of bands were in pursuit of musical intricacy, acdc decided to instinct, rawness, and that ironically turned into their unmistakable identity. In acdc joined Atlantic Records in 1976. A significant step toward international recognition, although the label wasn't initially impressed with their sound as overly loud and tonally bad. Several executives referred to High Voltage disorganized and unsellable. If it wasn't for Phil Carson, the producer, who took it, it's possible that Instinct acdc was early Burial, followed by Let There Be Powerage and Rock. 1977-1978 saw them switch to Let There Be Rock. Religion into a metaphor of a rock, and the Let There Be sound. The guy said, and there was sound, and they raised it with powerage. Rebellion not in Prague or the melancholy of punk, the grace of rock with a thumping harsh tones, rhythms, and a middle finger attitude throughout each of those records. The defining factor was Angus Young, while Malcolm established a basis as strong as the catalyst was concrete. Angus. Erratic, fiery, and explosive, he was a well-oiled creature's shrieking soul. Device The Road to Hell. acdc's breakthrough was produced in 1979. By the well-known Robert Mutt Lang, whose accuracy and unrelenting studio requirements the band was pressured to perform every part numerous times until it was really sharp, something they had never encountered before. Prior to the outcome being a classic in Girls Got Rhythm, every guitar tone destroyed by fire, and If You Want Blood seems like it would explode out of your speakers, and the title Highway to Hell track turned into an enduring hymn of contemporary rock and roll, but with each high comes the possibility of October 19, 1980, Bon Scott. Though the band's crazy, impulsive frontman passed away following a night of excessive drinking, in London, driving a car, it wasn't only a death, the band's soul was slashed. Devastated, Angus didn't talk to the media, no remarks, he simply disappeared like though he had lost a piece of acdc himself was at a turning point. Disband or reincarnate, they made the decision to latter, not for profit, but for Bon. Malcolm's well-known statement that Bon would have desired that we continue. Angus and the band hired vocalist Brian Johnson from the group Geordie, whose voice is metallic, could thunderously yell, but still possess sufficient feeling to become simple lyrics into bullet points that go directly to the intellect. They went inside the studio in the Bahamas. Outside, it was thundering and storming. "That's Bon," Angus exclaimed as lightning struck, kicking off the performance from hell. Back in the album, Black began as a funeral album cover with no pictures or tricks, yet inside it was the most memorable farewell ever. Hell's Bell started to ring for a bandmate who had died. Featuring powerful riffs and a tolling bell as blended iron, you shaken me all night seduction with a burst of vitality, shoot to the thrill of a fast-moving bullet, and back with its tight, forceful riff in Black become a landmark in the history of music. Sold more than 50 million copies in Black, becoming the album's second best-selling, only surpassed by Michael Jackson's Excitement in the 1980s and 1990s. New trends include grunge and glam metal, industrial rock, yet acdc never followed. For Those About to Rock was their release. Fly on the Wall, 1981, 1985, and the All of Razor's Edge 1990, remaining faithful to their motto is, tight, hard, no frills, no caving in. The media frequently accused them of repeating themselves. Gave one of the most renowned rock performances. Returns, they say, "We've released 11 albums that all have the same sound." That's incorrect. 12. Angus Young were still wearing the schoolboy outfit, still wielded the Gibson SG, continued to duckwalk like a child chasing a lightning bolt. While missing class, he remained motionless as the world transformed. And after 8, people continued to turn to stare. After years of silence, acdc made a comeback in 2008. Black Ice's album peaked at number 1 charts in 29 nations. The trip brought in more than $440 million, which makes it among the most prosperous tours in the history of music. 2014's Rock or Bust was published under a Malcolm had been in the shadow of loss. Given a dementia diagnosis and had to depart this time, however, the band but Angus continued. As the final warrior still alive, commanding the Angus Young, a band forward, never pursued splendor. He pulled it along with him for more than 50 years, he never altered his style, didn't alter his position at all. Altered his voice, which in some way made he is more resilient than anyone. Otherwise, the tragedy of Malcolm's passing and the Malcolm Young's unsaid sorrow was never the man in the middle, he wasn't the face on the album covers. Voice that opened each performance, but Malcolm was the one who had Angus's heart. Who established the framework for each riff, each arrangement, each drum beat, every acdc. They didn't need to talk much, one look was sufficient to determine what the other was imagining and feeling. In front of dazzling lights on stage and the tens of thousands of people roared as the two with nothing, brothers may switch out chords. Angus once stated, "I don't more than a nod. I simply don't care what the audience thinks. Take a look at Malcolm. If he nods, I'm carrying it out. In 2014, everything began to Malcolm, the oldest brother, cracks. The band's co-founder started to forget chords and lyrics, even the items that had formerly a component of his body. The early onset dementia was diagnosed. Terrible illness that not only destroys recollections, but gradually robs the very all day long. Angus witnessed the essence of a person. Hour by hour, day by day, and that was the most difficult aspect. Wasn't the death that hurt the most, it was the slow absence of the brother I used to know. Malcolm left his position with the band. His Stevie Young, a nephew, was brought in. Not since his technique was identical to Malcolm's, however. Since he was family, everyone knew Malcolm couldn't be replaced. Angus continued to tour while performing. The guitar was still dressed like a schoolboy. They crossed the stage with a duck walk, but he became quieter off stage and stayed away from the media and hardly ever brought up Malcolm. Not because they were chilly, but because there are no adequate terms to describe that type of loss. Malcolm died in November. Quietly on the 18th of 2017 at the age of 64, without a media craze, just a straightforward somber declaration from the family and the group. Angus didn't provide a long honor. In a single, infrequent interview, he uttered a single sentence that left everyone silently: I felt like I was losing Malcolm. Lost an arm, but Angus refused to let it to acdc was swallowed by tragedy in 2020. Gathered the other participants, Brian Cliff Williams, Phil Rudd, and Johnson, all of who once appeared to have departed for excellent. They collaborated to record a new album, named Power Up, not as a fresh start. However, as a parting homage to Malcolm, the Through the Mists of Time was a song that, like a letter, it never gives a name. Someone personally, yet each and every lyric the picture seems to be a silent call through the mist of recollection. Feel your shadow in the darkness. Spirit in the air, accompany me on this journey. The clouds of time in each note. Angus remained conversing with Malcolm despite the world was unable to hear his brother's voice anymore. In a field where scandals abound and noise, the connection between the young brothers were unique. There was no showmanship, no promises, only a silent dedication that remained till the end. But Angus never made an effort to rise to fame, but via his silent suffering, his silent devotion, and that he remained in respectful quiet throughout loss, he turned into something priceless. A younger sibling who performs in rock save his deceased brother's soul. Angus Young's live personal life on stage is a crazy duck walking whirlwind. Swinging his SG like that on his slender legs, he's capturing lightning in midair, but the applause stops when the lights go out. Fades and disconnects the guitar. Doesn't hide away in opulent hotels, parties, or try to get attention. He fades into the darkness and comes back to he is a shy, introverted man at heart, who, completely in contrast, chooses to stay at home. The picture of Angus, a worldwide rock star, married a Dutch woman named Ellen van Lockcam. 1980, during the height of acdc's first significant apex, they came together via a European mutual friend without any scandals, media vows of romance, just a straightforward link, and they have remained. The pair has been together for more than 40 years. Has no kids and doesn't show up on red carpets and refrains from sharing personal images. Ellen decides to stay away from the Angus respects that spotlight. He believes that true love doesn't require they split in order to be shown as authentic. Their stay in 3 different residences. A property in Sydney's Kangaroo Point is a big home in Ellen's hometown in Alton, the Netherlands, and a quiet apartment in Glasgow where every location where Angus grew up is planned considering privacy, not being ostentatious but sufficiently isolated for him to retreat from when not on tour. The world the house and the pair created Alton themselves possesses a reading room, a private studio, an expansive garden, as well as a wine cellar that is utterly vacant as Angus doesn't drink despite serving as the spokesperson for one of Angus is one of the greatest bands in rock history. Is someone who has never had alcohol in their hands. While his fellow musicians battled with accidents, rehabilitation, and expulsion, he stuck with chocolate milk during the excursions, and the only beverage he's ever had is tea. Is smoking cigarettes something he's hooked to? Angus has never been able to stop. Drive a lot, despite the fact that he has a remarkable assortment of vintage vehicles in 1930s Ferrari 458 and Bentley 4.5L Italy, a Ford, and a Rolls-Royce Phantom Model 48. All of them have a rich history and similar to him in symbolism, but offstage Angus stays out of the spotlight by not being on. He doesn't like interviews on social media, doesn't appear on talk shows, and leads a peaceful life. As though only half of his existence exists, he likes oil beneath the drapes. Luzzie, in particular, enjoys jazz and painting. Armstrong, in his personal space, among his first SG guitar, is seen in family photos. Twisted and discolored by perspiration on the palms, however, never kept in a display cabinet. Angus believes that success isn't determined by numbers. Any tour honors or fans' achievements is being able to live authentically without needing to provide someone an explanation, so even if he may be considered an icon by the world, he continues to regard himself as the child who never wore school uniforms as a child. Wearing a suit and listening to loud music with my brother, in a time when the majority of artists require ongoing visibility in order to prevent being ignored, Angus Young made the opposite decision. The more silent he is, the more he becomes more memorable. The less he attempts to maintain their notoriety, the more the world won't allow him leave his current life and legacy. Angus Young is still not at 69 resting, writing a memoir, or retiring announcement. No selling music rights for a cozy pension, but instead he maintains taking his Gibson SG and placing it in during that period, the schoolboy's uniform, and running as though it were a race against time. He departed in 2024. And Angus came back with for their inaugural power-up tour, acdc since 2016, after years of suffering and disturbance, taking the lead in a reunion lineup of Cliff Williams, Phil Rudd, and Brian Johnson. Stevie Young. Angus continued to be they performed at Wembley with an irreplaceable core. Before Tens, Croke Park in Berlin, and